Welcome back to Fixed Income in 15. In this episode, I'm talking to Jared Isaacman, CEO and founder of Shift4 and Astronaut, and Chris Heusler, Chief Commercial Officer at S&P Global Ratings. Today is about leadership, career, teams, and of course, space. So a quick reminder of the views of the external guest are their views alone, and they do not represent the views of S&P Global Ratings. Okay, Jared and Chris, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Jared, let's kick off with some questions for you. For people who don't know you, can you give us the story of your career so far, including Shift4, Inspiration4, and anything else you think would be interesting to hear?
Sure. So I started my company, which is Shift4 Payments, 23 years ago. So I was 16 years old. I was in my parents' basement. So it's a cool story in that regard. And it was a product of me largely hating high school. So I wanted to kind of get away and start building a career. I certainly had no idea it would turn into something like it is today. But we started out in those very early basement days as just a kind of a general practitioner of payments. So what we do is we enable electronic commerce, point of sale payments, whether you're at a restaurant or an e-commerce website or staying at a hotel or stadium. And what happened, and this is where my career kind of branched off a little bit, is I started waking up on my keyboard. And I was like, man, I need a hobby. So I've been an aviation enthusiast, since I was a kid. I built my first computer so I could play, flight simulators. And I started flying, and I really didn't stop. So much so, I mean, my life really is it's a lot of work. It's family and it's flying, and occasionally I go and climb a mountain or something. But that aviation career has taken me to a lot of interesting places. A whole defense aerospace company I built, flying air shows. Ultimately, I flew on a orbital spaceflight mission called Inspiration4. I'm sure we'll kind of touch on that a little bit. And then in terms of my day job, we grew out of the basement to where we are today, where we power about a $250 billion a year in payment volume, predominantly in the United States. About 33% of all restaurants use Shift4, about 40% of all hotels. Most of the stadiums you'd go to watch a game, most of the ski resorts you'd go to, about half the Las Vegas Strip, and we're expanding internationally. So that's a quick background there.
Fantastic. So you mentioned you built Shift4 from your parents' basement, and now it's you said it's a large company, 200,000 customers, multiple offices, thousands of employees. So in terms of your leadership throughout this period, what tactics or strategies do you try to utilize to make sure you're hiring the right people and leading to get the most out of them, trying to ensure that they're still happy in their role?
Well, I'll kind of take the latter part of the question first, and just leadership. First is to be incredibly engaged on the points that you just raised, tactics and strategy, to be part of the constructing process, to see it through, to be with your team, through, the best times and the most challenging ones. Be very visible. I've always wanted to kind of lead from the trenches throughout our entire 23 years. And that's taken us through some interesting times: .com, 9/11, the Great Recession, obviously, of late during the pandemic. So I think being very visible and very much part of, tactical day-to-day execution, the construction of the strategic plan and seeing it through, again, good and bad times, I think is a very important part of leadership. Very actively engaged with our entire workforce, which I admit it gets harder when you get to like 2,000 employees in a lot of locations. But that just makes it even more imperative to get out there and interact and make sure everybody's kind of aligned around, common vision and staying, one team, one dream. I think that, we recently became a public company about 2 years ago. So, actually having, a stock plan that can align everyone around, the equity of the business is actually a good thing as you expand, to ensuring people kind of track towards your North Star. And that's kind of how it is today. I think in our early years, the basement years, some of the best years, it's actually the easiest because you're all kind of in such a tight-knit group, sharing in everybody's kind of successes and failures. It's easy to lead that way. It's also easy to recruit and bring on talent. because when you are bringing people into an organization at that point, it's like total immersion. You're jumping right in with the sharks, but you're surrounded by people that everybody kind of has almost universal knowledge on the company, on the strategy. You can get people up to speed very easily. So in our earliest days, bringing in people that that knew us, that were familiar with us, was probably the best way to scale the organization with good talent. As you get bigger, it certainly gets harder. Being a public company helps. Having a lot of good recognizable customers establishes some credibility out there. And I think also we tend now, as we continue to grow and expand, look to bring in outside perspectives from people with expertise from organizations that we admire, that think about things differently than we do, and maybe kind of combining a little of our DNA with some of that external DNA from other parallel industries, that have found success is probably been a big part of our recruiting strategy of late. So kind of work backwards there with your two questions, but hopefully got them both.
No, fantastic. So, Chris, can you give us an overview of your position as Chief Commercial Officer at S&P Global Ratings? So, what are your responsibilities, and what's like a typical day in the life?
Thanks. Sure, Joe. As Chief Commercial Officer for Ratings, I think the role for me is to help connect our business to all of our external stakeholders. I work directly with sales teams, relationship management, as well as product delivery, product development, and market outreach teams to really connect our great analytic teams that are creating this, fabulous content with the market. So we have teams around the world that are talking to every major stakeholder, whether it's issuers, investors, intermediaries, everyone who's really trying to consume our content. And so my job is to connect the dots with those people and to find ways for us to get that into the market so that those investors around the world that are relying on our analytic insight can consume it. So day in a life it can be very different. The last few weeks, the last few months have proven a whole new set of challenges as we've been trying to help with the situation in Europe and what we're doing to help our people on the ground. I mean, we've been committed as a people first organization. We're a heavy people business. We use technology, but it's the people that really create everything we do. And the last few months, we've been spending time just making sure that we're connecting, finding ways to help them, dealing with a lot of individual personal situations, but making sure that we say to them, look, it's our job to help you to find ways to support their needs. And so, yeah, it's, we kind of make the comment of, look, we'll figure it out. Do whatever you need. We'll figure it out later, but we're here to help you. Most days, it's around staying connected with clients, working with teams, showing them how to, either advance their discussions from a sales perspective or from a engagement perspective. But I'm very much around getting in and talking to clients, working with the teams, spending time every single day, helping people do things that they never thought they could do, whether it's finding ways to help them open doors, think of new ways of connecting with a client. All of that is what I try and do every day.
Great. And Chris, you mentioned there, you're the leader of kind of hundreds of individuals from the sales and marketing, the market outreach world. What do you do to kind of make those people tick, kind of create an environment where individuals can leverage their personal strengths, but also follow their passion within a role, and fit in culturally too? How do you get those to all fit together?
There's a couple things. First, a lot of people will talk about, you succeed as a team. Well, we succeed as a team or we fail as a team, but we are a team. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has an opportunity to give their opinion, help share an idea. I text everyone, if there's an opportunity, I want them to know that I'm here to help, as well as, if they need help, to raise their hand. But the other piece for all of it is, there is a cultural aspect. There's a team bonding that happens when you start working with people in different geographies or even in the same geography, finding ways to help them understand, hey, we have to do this together. We want to leverage things. Your strengths are complementary to someone else's strengths. But, when I build teams or when I bring people on, one of the questions I ask early is, what do you not like to do? Because if you find people that all don't want to do the same thing, it makes it very difficult to get that piece done. So it's kind of finding that way to get people to connect and realize, hey, you have a chance to be part of something great. Bring your best talents to work, and no, we're not just here to do the easy stuff. We're here to do the stuff that's hard. And if we can all be focused on us trying to tackle those, that's kind of what I want to promote with them and help them accomplish.
Absolutely. So, Jared, in addition to Shift4, you mentioned previously you started a company around kind of 10 years ago called Draken International. So that provides military fighter jets to the aerospace and defense industry. So for someone who isn't aware of Draken, can you let us know a bit about the business, why you started it, the challenges you faced, and what initially you were looking to achieve?
Sure. So, I was flying air shows, was really lucky to be part of a 7-ship or 7-fighter jet aerobatic team. And we flew very similar to like the Thunderbirds or Blue Angels. In fact, we had, 2 former Thunderbirds on our team. And we'd fly all around the country, doing, flying 18 inches apart, doing loops and rolls to music. Lots of fun, very dangerous. So what we wanted to do was kind of pivot that into something that was equally as fun, but a little bit more commercial. And we identified really an opportunity in the market where, due to budget constraints, the U.S. government was having to scale back its fleet of fighters and the amount of flight time available to every one of the pilots. But what hadn't changed is the requirement to simulate being the bad guy. So basically, a sparring partner, if you will. Someone has to play, the Russians or other potential threat countries. And it's a very professional role because you're not doing things the way the U.S. does them. You're executing on tactics that we think, potential adversaries might do. And the way that was done historically is the U.S. would generate those bad guys themselves, just like in the movie Top Gun, when you saw Jester and Viper, flying in A4 Skyhawks. And interestingly enough, we wound up buying A4 Skyhawks, just like in Top Gun, to simulate the bad guy. And the problem there is it was very expensive. An F-16 is about $30,000 per flight hour. An F-15 is about $50,000 a flight hour. And stealth fighters like the F-22 and F-35 are like upwards of $80,000, $90,000 a flight hour. Also, in addition to the cost, every flight hour on an airplane, you don't get it back. And it's at one point or another destined to go to the boneyard. So every flight hour you can preserve on a U.S. military aircraft is a flight hour that can be used for protecting national security in the future. So kind of recognizing these things, we said, what if this was outsourced? What if we put together a commercial air force? We would go and purchase fighter jets all around the world, different ones than you'd have in the U.S., ones that the U.S. military might not see until potentially actual combat at some point. And we wound up purchasing over 100 fighter jets all around the world. And we'd hire Air Force and Navy and Marine Corps reservists, those that recently retired, to basically professional bad guys. And we did it as an entirely turnkey. We provide the aircraft, the maintenance, even the kind of the jamming technology, the sensors, the radars, even the training weapons. And we would fly every day, 20, 30, 40 sorties sometimes a day against the military. And this was originally an industry that the Air Force said, and this goes to the challenges, we don't have a problem. When we submitted our first unsolicited proposal, there's no problem here. A year later, it was a $6 billion industry because it turned out they had a problem. And when you can provide 5 or 6 bad guy aircraft for the same cost per flight hour as one F-16, it creates a lot of value. And it also creates a problem because now the U.S. Department of Defense has to solve for numerically superior adversary, which is what we think would happen in potentially a real scenario. So lots of challenges. Procuring fighter jets as a private company and importing them across the world. There is maintenance and sustainability. Generally, when a country is ready to sell you their fighter jets, it's because it's used up all its life, because they know whatever they're going to buy next is going to be really, really expensive. So it's hard to find good jets. It's hard to maintain them. They have to still be credible and capable, as in they've got to be a worthy sparring partner, or why spar against them at all. There's security implications to it. There's training and safety. And then there's just contracting with the government. So when I started Draken, co-founded Draken, which was, like you said, about 11 years ago, I had already been in business for over a decade. So I basically had to unlearn everything from the normal corporate world to figure out how to do business with the government, which is not, again, it's very counterintuitive. It's in all honesty, it's backwards and it's broken and it has to be made better. And they would even say that themselves. But learned an awful lot along the way, had tons of fun. And then ultimately sold Draken about almost 3 years ago to Blackstone, just as we were starting to prepare to take my day job, public, and just need to focus some of the attention there. But tons of fun. I mean, you're flying fighter jets. Like, next to space, it's like the second coolest thing I think you can be doing.
Great, fantastic. So, Chris, at kind of a very high level, what topics or market themes are really top of mind for our clients at the moment?
It's really hard to follow that last comment. So sparring and fighter jets to the credit markets. It's not the easiest transition, but let me start. I mean, right now what we're hearing about is there's a lot of concern around the political instability around the world and what happens next. I mean, that's pretty much number one topic for people. And the impact on markets. We've seen really volatile and choppy markets, and we expect that we hope that we see some resolution to things quickly, which will then provide stability on so many fronts, right? So that's the key. Then, as you think about where they've been thinking, this idea around sustainability continues to grow. The interest level, the focus, the level of question we're getting day in and day out, it's expanding. And I think there's probably not a investor call that's happening today where that's not, if not the number one or number two topics for people to be bringing up. So how do they diversify? How do they make sure that they get the right information, not just kind of greenwashing, but actually having real solid analysis that's helping them make decisions? And then risk. I mean, I think people are looking at some of the events that have happened outside of Europe, but just with real defaults and real risk being reviewed again as to what's going to happen. And so those are the themes that are out there. And I think we're going to, continue to help people assess those, find ways to provide that information. We've had very, very favorable credit markets for many years. And I think people are looking now at, what are some of these new risks that they really they need to start reevaluating.
Great. And Chris, can you tell us just a bit about your own personal career path? So where you started, how you've moved throughout your career, and any bumps along the road?
Yeah, so I like to say I'm a reformed banker because I spent most of my career in banking, but it all started when I was in college. I took a trip around the world. I was able to visit 10 countries in 100 days, and I was able to learn a lot more doing that trip. It kind of opened my eyes to the global, everything that people were dealing with around the world, and it made me want to work internationally. And so when I joined my prior institution, the focus was being able to work overseas. And so I spent some time in Hong Kong at a time when really China was opening up, and I was able to help U.S. and European corporates branch off into China. And so I did that for a few years, and then came back and really connected the international market piece in everything I did. I was able to work for our international group and set up a team really early on where I saw a need within the bank that we weren't covering clients the way we needed to from a cross-border perspective. And so I set up a small team of 4 people and grew it over the years, and then kind of grew it into a much bigger business that we deployed around the bank. And then kept staying focused on the international piece and managed teams overseas. And I think when I left the bank, we had people in 40 something countries covering 20,000 clients. So you learn a lot about different cultures and different ideas. And so the door opened to come over to S&P and I've been doing this job for a few years, and it's been great because it's been a place where I could go and kind of use all the knowledge and skill that I had coming out of the banking side to put a client-focused approach in our ratings business. And so it's been great. There have been a lot of, maybe hurdles or side steps that you have to take, but you learn from all of them and you find ways to adapt and keep moving forward.
Fantastic. So, Jared, can you give us an overview of what Inspiration4 was, how it kind of came together, and your role, what you achieved as a team too? I know there's a lot to cover there.
Yeah, so I was incredibly lucky to have the opportunity with Inspiration4. It was been a big space enthusiast for some time. I think going back to about, being 5 years old or so, and of course, never thought I'd have any opportunity to be an astronaut. But that's why I started flying, and then trying to fly, some of the most challenging type of aircraft I could, air shows and experimental and ex-military aircraft, because I thought that's as good as it's going to get. I still say, I think you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than being a NASA astronaut. Hopefully that'll change in the future. But I've just been, cheering on the sidelines for the commercial space industry, watching what organizations like SpaceX have been doing from a distance, which is incredible. They are, I think, hands down, best run, most innovative organization I've ever seen. Just hands down. Just every time they're landing a rocket on a ship, it's just mind blowing, right? And they've done it 100 times, and no one else has done it once, which is rare in technology organizations. Usually, the number 2 guy is not that far behind. But it's been about 7 years, so I think that speaks to kind of their capabilities. And it was about not even 2 years ago. It was October of 2020 that I was reaching out to SpaceX and having a conversation on something completely unrelated to space. I was actually trying to invest in them, and the investment round closed, and I was trying to maneuver my way in. And I just made a comment, at some point or another, when you're ready to open this up. And keep in mind, they hadn't even resumed operational flights for NASA at this point. They just did Demo 2, which was a heck of an accomplishment. But it's not like they were, in a good rhythm yet with putting human beings in space yet. They hadn't flown NASA's Crew 1 yet. And they said, well, we might be more ready than you think. And by the end of the day, I got an email from their head of human spaceflight programs. And within 2 weeks, Inspiration4 was born. I had no idea. For all I knew, maybe I'd have an opportunity years and years from now. But once I heard and knew it was, we were going to be the first. The first commercial mission to orbit. No one has ever gone to space in orbit before that wasn't sent there by a world superpower. It's the United States, it's Russia and China. Those are the only 3 nations in the world that have developed a capability to accelerate human beings to 17,500 miles an hour and keep them there, and then bring them home safely. So the idea that this would be the first commercial mission, first comes with, a lot of responsibility. I wasn't going to just, take, my friends up or something. Every one of the crew members had to be able to deliver a really powerful and inspiring message. So ultimately, we went out and found a crew that I never met before. I never knew any of them. I wanted, an entrepreneur, just because I know, growing up how hard it is to build a business and highlight it and build momentum around it. So I was lucky to find Dr. Proctor through an independently evaluated entrepreneur contest. What a human being. She is a geoscientist, a college professor, a pilot, Civil Air Patrol, scuba instructor, and analog astronaut. So meaning she lived in those shipping containers for 3 months to simulate what it would be like on another world. And she was a NASA runner-up in 2009. And she's also an artist and poet. She checked every box to try and be an astronaut and got this close, but never gave up, and continued to follow her dream. And she ultimately became our mission pilot. First black female pilot of a spacecraft in history, which was long overdue, but couldn't think of a better person to fill that role. We wanted to have a immense charitable component to this, so that people understood that you can still dream big about the future we all want to live in for tomorrow, without ignoring some of the hardships and challenges we have here on Earth today. So St. Jude Children's Research Hospital became the charitable beneficiary for our mission. So we gave one seat right away to a frontline healthcare worker who works at St. Jude. What I didn't know at the time was she was a childhood cancer survivor. Diagnosed with bone cancer at 10 years old, treated at St. Jude, beat it at St. Jude, wanted to grow up and help other kids in the same fight she went through, became a physician assistant at St. Jude. That was Haley Arsenault. She became our medical officer on Inspiration4. Awesome human being. And then the final seat went to Chris Simbrowski. So what we did is we had a Super Bowl commercial to try and energize the world about human space exploration. We asked, make a donation on the website to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. You'd have a, who knows, 1 in a million chance of maybe getting fitted for a spacesuit, but at least you're doing something really good along the way. Chris made a donation. Turns out, super space buff, was a space camp counselor, worked in the Air Force, working on like some of the largest rockets in the military, and then ultimately flew as a mission specialist on Inspiration4. So really lucky to have an amazing crew. They absolutely did their job of inspiring the world as to what's possible. And we wound up raising about $250 million for St. Jude along the way. So and it was a safe mission. We accomplished everything we set out to do for 3 days on orbit. Tons of science and research. In fact, we're getting together in about a week in Houston to hear some of the results from some of the research we were doing over those 3 days. So incredible mission in all respects. Was really lucky to be part of it.
That's
Fantastic.
Actually, I've got a quick question if you're okay with that, Joe. But Jared, did anything go wrong that you had to improvise on while you were doing this? I mean, those days had to be amazing, but what was the surprise?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have quite the repetition yet. So, when we flew, I mean, just to remind everyone, prior to Falcon 9 and Dragon, which was the vehicle that we flew to orbit, it's what NASA uses. Human beings had not gone to outer space from American soil for nearly a decade since the space shuttle retired. So the missions that had flown since resuming that capability with Falcon was Demo 2, Crew 1, Crew 2, and then us on Inspiration4. So you had 10 human beings that had gone up prior to us with a brand new launch vehicle. It's a long way of saying, like, it's not like you had a lot of at-bats to figure everything out, but I would say it was a near flawless mission. There is so many layers of redundancy built into a human spaceflight vehicle. Lots of automation, lots of manual and backup capabilities. We trained for 6 months in a simulator where like everything is going wrong constantly. You have some very Apollo 13 like moments, and we had virtually nothing go wrong on orbit. We had like one of the 2 fans that power the bathroom failed, and that became like a big headline because everybody loves the second grade conversation. But the point is, there's redundancy. There's another one, so everything worked fine. We had a couple, kind of software glitches that you'd expect from radiation hits, where you have triple redundancy, so you just recycle a system. That worked fine. We had 80% communication coverage, which was pretty much what was predicted. It's largely a constellation of old satellites and ground stations, but they're fixing that with Starlink capabilities, so that's cool. But yeah, I would say like it was almost an entirely nominal mission.
Fantastic. So, Jared, you mentioned SpaceX. Mm-hmm. My guess is that you must have built a relationship with Elon Musk over the kind of past 2-ish years. What's your relationship like with Elon, and what have you learned from working with him?
Well, I'll tell you, I learned an awful lot working with SpaceX in general. The year leading up to the mission was just as exciting and thrilling as the mission itself. I know that's probably hard to believe, but being part of constructing a mission, going through the training of it, and mostly observing what I think are some of the most talented individuals in the world. I mean, the collection of talent. Every organization, you have some really strong A plus players. You're surrounded by A players. There's going to be some B players, something. SpaceX, it's all A plus. I mean, they have a vision of making humankind a multi-planetary species because the world is a more interesting place when you can journey among the stars. Hard to beat that. So you're literally attracting amazing talent from all across the world that believe there's no bigger impact that they can make on the world than being part of SpaceX. At the same time, by the way, St. Jude is very similar. I mean, their vision is no child should die in the dawn of life, and they similarly attract unbelievable talent. So it's great to observe both. But I'll say that watching SpaceX, we came back and completely retooled at Shift4, new vision, new mission, new values, new philosophies. And I robbed a ton of it from SpaceX. It's hard not to. It would be irresponsible of me not to, when you're observing such an incredible organization, and not take back some of the things that, at least I believe, witnessing make them so special. So we've incorporated a lot of those philosophies in how we do things at Shift4. It absolutely is making us a better company as a result. And in terms of Elon specifically, had several conversations in the construction of Inspiration4. I generally try not to bother the guy. He's literally thinking all the time about solving the world's problems. I mean, I don't think I'm overstating it. I think that's really what he's doing almost all the time. So you try not to interrupt that. Probably spent a little bit more time as we embarked on now the next series of 3 missions, which is called the Polaris program. That will culminate with the launch of a completely new generation, entirely reusable launch vehicle. Could be this 737 of spaceflight called Starship. This will be the vehicle that'll put human beings back on the moon and will take the first human beings to Mars and maybe ultimately even colonize it. So that's something that has a lot of Elon's time, and his input was like absolutely vital in constructing our first mission coming up, which is Polaris Dawn, and ultimately he shapes the path to get to Starship.
Fantastic. And Chris, which individuals do you know or admire from afar and look at and think they're a good leader? And what makes them a good leader, in your opinion?
There's a lot of, I mean, you think about leadership, you think about the different qualities. And I think I mentioned before that this, having the ability to motivate people and to create that vision is key. I mean, I think about, way back historic of Lincoln and Churchill type of approaches, MLK, who has done so much, but then, even just in the more recent of what Steve Jobs did, some of the other pieces. If you think of where we were before Apple did what it did, and this is not an endorsement of Apple, but it's as simple, it's in everybody's hand, and they found a way to make it work simply. And, Gates did it early, but those are those kind of approaches that have kind of changed so much of what we do every single day. And, leaders like that can inspire and think beyond, what's right in front of them. That's what I view as a leader. And Jared's been talking about it this whole time. I mean, these approaches and thinking differently. It's, those are great examples of just being a visionary.
Great. And Chris, what's the best piece of advice you've received? And that can be about life or work or both.
Wow, there's been a lot. I think the easiest one for me to summarize: treat everyone the way you want to be treated. When I started listening and working with people and leading people, having a direct connection with people and being able to relate and have them feel like, they can approach you as easily as you can approach them, is something that has always been a core theme or a core idea for me. If you treat everyone the way you want to be treated as well, and you trust them and empower them, those are the key principles that I try to operate by.
Sure. And Jared, a question for you, kind of a broad question. What things, peoples, or experiences make you happy in life right now?
I'm very motivated off of great challenges. So I find embarking on things that are very, very hard, very complicated, very demanding, quite stimulating in a number of ways, sometimes intellectually, sometimes physically, like in the form of mountain climbing. But it's not just like external activities either. I think in a large part I was driven to business because it's very hard, and driven to start another one in the case of Draken because it's hard. My whole aviation career has been about seeking out greater challenges, and we continue to do that on our corporate initiatives. 23 years, almost all of our payment volume, almost all of our revenue was derived inside the borders of the United States. We just acquired a payment platform in Europe with an ambition to go global. Like, I find these very enjoyable. I think if the challenges weren't there, the motivation wouldn't be either. So very challenge driven, I'd say, in almost all aspects of my life.
Great. And Chris, same question for you. What things, people, or experiences make you happy in life right now?
I think the last few years has helped me refocus. Spending time with family, being able to connect has been a huge benefit. Fortunately, the family's been safe and we've been able to get through all this. But I was able to reconnect. I spent my life on the road, flying and seeing all these countries and meeting the teams, which is great to be able to do. But I don't need to do it as often as I did. And being able to stay connected with them has been a real benefit. And that's been a real positive. I enjoy a lot of things to enjoy, but connecting back with family has been just absolutely wonderful during the last few years.
Fantastic. So there's a couple of space questions left, one for both of you. So Chris, I'll start with you. As the non-astronaut and the potential voice of the public here, so what year do you guess humans will walk on Mars?
On Mars. 25 years from now? Walk on Mars? No, it's probably shorter than that. Maybe 15.
Cool. So Jared, same question. As the astronaut who's been to space and kind of works within the industry, when do you think humans will walk on Mars?
So good question, and I'll actually tie it a little bit back to something very relevant to S&P. Look, if things are optimal, and I say, like, in terms of availability of low cost capital, like it will certainly be before the end of this decade. If things are to change in the world, I mean, look, I think so many of the great technical advances we've seen, how society has been so positively impacted really over the last 14 years is because we've been essentially living in a zero interest rate environment throughout that entire time period. That is actually, and when I think about some of the conversations I've had with Elon, the availability of capital in kind of recent history is mind blowing relative to when we both started our careers. When he was doing PayPal, when we were in our basement days, it was non-existent. Take organizations like Tesla that very struggled for a very long time in order to get momentum and help proliferate electronic vehicles everywhere. You've seen in the last couple of years, anyone with essentially a decent idea on an electric vehicle could SPAC and raise an enormous valuation. Well, I would say our ability, like, there are numerous commercial space companies now, numerous launch vehicle providers. A lot of them SPAC, raise a bunch of capital. SpaceX has benefited. I mean, not only do they have like one of the wealthiest people in the world running the company as their largest shareholder, they've been able to raise capital at very low rates while they build out their constellations of Starlinks and such. So assuming this this climate remains somewhat favorable in the years ahead, human beings will walk to Mars. And if we get there, I guarantee you it's part of the SpaceX plan that we're going to stay. Whether it's outposts, if you will, with some periodic rotation or something more grand than that. But the climate changes, availability of capital returns to something I saw much closer to my career, and same with Elon's. Then that changes the game entirely, and it'll certainly slow the pace of progress.
Great. So Jared, the last question of the episode goes to you. So on Fixed Income in 15, I usually interview leaders, influential individuals from the world of finance and economics and beyond. So who would you recommend I ask to be a guest on a future episode of the show?
Well, I'd say one of the most talented, investors, and I have a bias on this, but talented investors, great finance mind, and was actually quite instrumental in shaping some of my career over the last 6 years in the course of the company. Is a board member of mine. His name is Chris Cruz. Probably a lot of people would not have heard of him, but I'm quite sure if it's S&P on topic, he'd make a great contribution to your podcast.
Great stuff. Well, my thanks to you, Jared, and you, Chris, for your time today. It's been very fascinating to get your views. It's not often we talk about walking on Mars on this podcast, so it's great. So for everyone watching and listening, see you next time on Fixed Income in 15.